button. Looks like everything is going good. And hopefully the YouTube channel's muted in the back. I hate that because I'll change my screen to come hang out over here. And then all of a sudden you'll hear what we're saying on in the background, and I got to go find that screen and mute it and all that.
That happens to me all the time on Morning Metal if my laptop's on.
Yeah, okay, great. So you know what I'm talking about. You've been there and done that. So I got a bit of a dry throat to kick the show off here, but it is what it is. Good evening, everyone. It's Sunday night here, hanging out with my good friend Steve the Weed Wizard for another fine episode of the HeadBonger's Bowl. Tonight, for a topic, we decided we were going to get into NWOBHM, or better maybe known as the new wave of British heavy metal. Steve, you were the one that came up with this idea, brother, and I think it is one hell of a great suggestion, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's currently probably my favorite heavy metal collective, right? My favorite subgenre of heavy metal. Just the way that you have like the melodic guitars, just the different paces, the tempo changes, a lot of epic songs, and and very much influenced by Judas Priest, who the big defining thing is Judas Priest is not new wave of British heavy metal, and everything after them is, right? So like they were the band that you had Sabbath and Motorhead and UFO and these other metal bands becoming a thing, and then Priest was the one that kind of put their finger on it and was like, no, this is heavy metal, we know what we're doing. And then after a few albums just kind of solidified the heavy metal genre, which then launched this new wave of British heavy metal. And obviously the first big band you talk about, you're wearing the shirt, you can't talk about the new wave of British heavy metal without talking about Iron Maiden, who to this day are the most influential band of the era, the
Absolutely.
biggest band of that era. My favorite band. My biases are going to show because I on Spotify I was listed as being in the top 0.05% of listeners of Iron Maiden on Spotify. So I listen to Iron Maiden more than 99.95% of the world, and I can do better. I can do better. I see my flaws and I see how I can do better. I have 0.04% of improvement that I could make. So
it's all about goals in life.
Yeah. So now I know what I have to do for next year.
Yeah. I agree. Iron Maiden definitely at the forefront. If I think of the NWOBHM, they're the band that very first comes to mind. Now, before we started rolling, we were talking about, we didn't go into detail, but we kind of acknowledged that there was going to be a few bands where we might agree or disagree, where there are some fringe bands that they kind of could go either way. And you've already mentioned Judas Priest, who I think are one of them. They came before, were an established act before, and were doing their thing before any of the vast majority of these other the new wave bands that were coming through. But at the same time, the sound is there. They got big at about the same time, overseas and across Europe. So I kind of, I don't know. I think they could go either way. And my tendency would be to kind of actually put them in there. Although they would be kind of like, you get the grandfathered in status, I guess, just because they were kind of there doing it before, but
it's kind of like
it was there.
It's kind of like the argument of, is Black Sabbath metal, or were they that proto metal that influenced it? Like, can you be the genre that you start, right?
Yeah,
because if you can be the genre you start, and Black Sabbath is heavy metal, then yeah, Judas Priest kicked off the new wave of British heavy metal and is. Either that or they're the one that started it. You know what I'm saying? Like, can you
Yeah.
be a member of the movement you start is really what it, which is an odd thing to think of, because the obvious answer should be, of course you are. But I feel like in music, when it comes to influence and genre, you know, you form into a genre. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So that's actually a really great point. I never really thought of it that way. It's just it's a way off topic thing, but like Jesus Christ was not a Christian, right? So it's kind of
That, yeah,
what came
exactly.
after him. So that's a very excellent point right there, because yeah, they did have they were putting out records. Was it 74? They started releasing albums as Judas Priest.
I think so. Because I think it may have been 78. No, so it may have been 76 or 77. But it was like, but it was mid to late 70s. But like, definitely at least 3 years. Iron Maiden's first album dropped in 80. Like Iron Maiden was 1980.
Yeah.
And they were definitely before that. You know, it was I mean, yeah, I can't remember if Rockarola was 74 or 77.
I
But it
I
was,
I feel like that they, and I could be wrong, that they have a release from 1974. I'll see if I can go have a look on my
I was gonna
Spotify.
say, we have the technology
Probably
to,
find something here and let us know.
in fact, actually I have it. No, I don't.
Oh, I'm screwing something up there though. That's not.
But let's see here. Judas Priest's first album was
We need the Jeopardy music.
Rockarola 1974.
Fuck
You were
yes.
right. Yep, 74. Which, that's the other thing. So new wave of British heavy metal, I really think was classified more as that like 80s
Well,
metal, you know?
to me they were kind of like the answer. What came to, they were like rock and roll's answer to punk, I guess. Like in a way,
Yeah.
the next thing after punk, because you had all these bands that were like before the new wave came. You had like bands like Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Black
Mm-hmm.
Sabbath, that were incredibly fucking insanely talented, man. Like Eric Clapton, like it was just guitar god after guitar god was the era. And then, but not everybody can play to those standards. In fact, very few people can play to those standards. But there's a lot of people that can play decent rhythms and strum that out. So that was
Right.
punk rock, right? And it doesn't have to sound fucking well structured and be all this well orchestral Bohemian
Yeah.
Rhapsody type stuff. It could just be rough aggression, and we're pissed off, and we're gonna sing about that. But then towards the end of the like, this was like, it was kind of a flash in the pan to punk rock, and at the end, like 78 is a lot by a lot of people considered to be the death of punk, and that is right around the time the new wave of British heavy metal started coming out. Motorhead, when did they release? Was it Overkill or Out on Parole? I can't recall which came first, but it was that 78 or 79.
I thought it was actually earlier than that. Wasn't,
Really?
let me check. Yeah, I thought Motorhead, I could be wrong on this too, but I thought Motorhead was okay, they formed in 75. That's what I was thinking. But Overkill was, where is it? Where's the discography though? Studio albums. Oh no, 77 Motorhead was their first album.
Oh, okay. Yeah. How did I miss that one? Okay. And actually, did England come after that, or why do I think England was their second one?
I've got Motorhead, Overkill, then Bomber, then On Parole. I've never heard of one called England though. Ace of Spades, Iron Fist. Ace of Spades was 1980.
Okay, so now to me, Motorhead's another one that I think is a fringe band that I kind of lump in there because they're around at the time, although the sound doesn't quite fit the structure.
Yeah,
They're kind of
exactly.
Motorhead's just that more meat and potato, straightforward rock and roll. Like you
Yeah,
get rock and roll, but they're also one of those bands that they can tour with anything even remotely heavy.
yep.
And so I think they kind of get floater status thrown into that group there.
Yeah, I
Uh,
agree.
but you could almost say throw them in now, like just like Judas Priest, how we were talking, and give them kind of that you were there ahead of the movement. Do you really belong, or are you?
Right. Well, and like you said, the big difference with Motorhead and the rest of the new wave of British heavy metal is there's a difference in the tonal qualities, in the sound, in the melodic qualities, in the songwriting. It's you don't have the changes, you don't have the same melodies, you don't have the same, it's just a different songwriting style. But like you said, it really was on that wave. It really came about. So I really do feel like they would, I don't know, are they right before, or are they a part of it is the big question. Because either way, they're, a huge influence on that wave of music.
Yeah, well, and even this is one of those ones where looks shouldn't really matter, but when you think about the way the new wave British bands the way they look, and then the next thing to happen after that, the glam, the way a lot of those bands look, because that was the next kind of trend that came after. Motorhead, they kind of everything about them in that regard is right there with the rest of their fellow British bands. So
yeah, you're right. And yeah, and you think about the other bands in the new wave of British heavy metal, and you think of a band like Saxon, and you can definitely hear some of that same kind of influence, some of that same songwriting, some of that same, a completely different vocal style, but similar tones sometimes, and
yeah,
similar song structures. And Saxon is one of those bands that they're especially their first several albums, songs like Princess of the Night, just every time it's on, I'm just fucking top volume.
yeah. Yeah, I hate to go with the most obvious choice with the entire Denim and Leather album. That was my introduction to them. So it's easily to just grab onto that and
But
just
it's so good. Like
it, it describes the scene, the fashion, the angst, and it held up true to even my day and age as a teenager too, because that was what you wore. Because if I grew up in like a cowboy redneck type of area of Prince George, where Storm Rider jean jackets was a thing. And there's a lot of like leather vest with patches going around, just like you remember seeing probably in your community as well.
I currently have a denim jacket that I wear everywhere, and I have a bunch of patches that I just haven't put on it yet. So I mean, like, I get it. I've been wearing jean jackets my whole life.
Yeah. Yeah, it's awesome to hear. Yeah. I was married in my leather vest with all my patches on it.
Oh, nice.
Now I don't know what that means because that marriage failed, but I can say that is me right there, because for most of my life, I just never had any intention on getting married. I'm like, I can love a woman, and just because I always looked at it as marriage is just a piece of paper, really, right?
Yeah.
And but when the discussions came about this, I was like, if I'm getting married, I'm gonna do it my style, and leather vest, that was part of it. Camo cargo shorts, was wearing those. There was no suit and tie or none of that going on. Like,
right. Yeah. Yeah, I get that. You gotta be you.
well, yeah, it's
But
exactly.
yeah, and going back to that, but like, you said like the obvious album, but I mean, it's a fucking beautiful album, right?
Yeah.
It really is, just start to finish, a really good album. which also makes me think of a band like Accept, who's still putting out good music.
Yeah.
Like another another one from the new wave that like fucking you don't hear about him as much. You don't think about him as much, but like it's not even like their radio hits that you got to listen for. It's like their deep cuts have some really great songs. Don't Drink the Kool-Aid is like from the last, I don't know, within the last 20 years. It's not one of their earlier like 80s rock anthems, but it's a great fucking song. Like they write good tunes.
Hungry Like a Shark. That's fucking, like it's, to me, they're I look at Accept, and I think I just said this a couple episodes ago. I looked at them as kind of like an AC/DC version of that genre, whereas it's just straight balls to the wall. I had to actually, that was completely coincidence. That's fucking hilarious. But you know what I mean? Just straightforward, like fucking straight ahead, fucking rock and roll. You know what you're gonna get. Each album's a little bit different, but you kind of know what you're gonna get, and that's not always a bad thing.
No.
Because how many times have you fucking listened to a record and the band changed the formula a little bit too much, and it just didn't work.
And I mean, and it goes back to, you said about, you compared them to AC/DC, and I always say my favorite AC/DC quote is when somebody said, you have 9 albums, they all sound the fuck the same. And he goes, no, that's bullshit. We have 11 albums and they all sound the fuck the same. It's like, if it works, do it, you know? Because all the AC/DC songs sound the same, except the little bit that they don't, and you sing along to every one of them full force because they're all just fucking bangers.
And it's just Accept is a little less radio friendly version of that, but it's all fucking catchy stuff. Like, they don't have Dirkenschneider singing anymore. I can't remember the guy's name, but it sounds good, man. It's just it's pissed off, it's raw, and but then it was okay. So we were just talking about Motorhead. Do they or do they not belong? You got a band like Accept, which is like, you could put right here or right here. Fucking imagine seeing that in a show, Motorhead and Accept. Fuck. So I think Motorhead all of a sudden does absolutely
like leans a little bit more, doesn't it? Well, and now here's the other fringe one that is, it's possibly my least favorite band on earth is Def Leppard, but honestly, I put them in with the new wave of British heavy metal because they're kind of the godfathers of glam, right? But if you ask Steve Harris, who is in the new wave of British heavy metal, he's going to say Def Leppard. If you ask Rob Halford, he's going to tell you Def Leppard. In fact, when you see people talk about it, you see listed Def Leppard as one of the top 3 bands listed in the new wave of British heavy metal.
But you know who will not tell you that they will be in there is Joe Elliott, the lead singer of Def Leppard. He will say, fuck no, we want nothing to do with it. And so this is one of those fringe bands where they could definitely go either way. Arguably the biggest band from that era. No, I don't even think it's arguable. I think they are. It's just a matter of where you finally want to lump them and put them.
Yeah.
Or in terms of records sold and radio and play and all that, I think they would be. Now, here's my thing. They kind of sound. They look like all the NWOBHM bands, but they sound like the glam bands. They have that more of that radio friendly top 40-ish kind of sounds.
Except when they came out, right? Pre-Paranoia, they were much more of, before they had to redefine their sound because their drummer lost his arm. And that, because of the technology at the time, led to a poppier sound. Those electric drums that he had to use, they weren't going to be you know, the same sound. They didn't have that capability at the time. So it became a more poppy sound. But before that act of God, they were a little heavier, they were more melodic. I still hated them, but they were more of a new wave of British heavy metal band.
See, I totally, I get it. I get the argument, but to me, they're too clean, too sanitized. Even those, you're absolutely right. Those first few albums of theirs, they're like Pyromania. Like it's heavy, man. Like Vivian Campbell went on, or fucking Dio went on to, how'd that work? Yeah, Vivian Campbell started then that with they went to go play in Def Leppard, right? Like, so there's the you got that interplay.
Yeah.
Where you can definitely take parts here and there, but I just like now, I feel like the style goes a little bit more glam. But it's not even really glam. It's just a little too top friendly, too top 40 friendly.
Here's my thing with glam, right? It is glam. What? Glam. We don't just say glam. We refer to it as glam metal, right?
Yeah, sometimes.
By definition, although it is a style of metal that is less appealing to people who tend to like the more heavier stuff, it is an offshoot of metal. It is a subgenre of metal.
Absolutely.
And so you have like your Motley Crue, your Guns N' Roses, and like, you know, because all of them are, you know, you get all of that fringe too, right? Yep. Like we could do a whole episode on glam.
Oh, and I'm sure we will, because I almost want to go in that direction now, but we'll keep it as advertised and stick to the British bands for now.
My point being is, when you think of these subgenres as being a product of two things, right? It's a product of sound and a product of time and place, right? So like the new wave of British heavy metal were the heavy metal acts coming out during the early 80s. Even if they're glam metal, they're still metal. And they still rode that wave. And that wave would not have been as big if it weren't for Def Leppard.
This is true.
Think about what Def Leppard did. I'd say, you know, if it weren't for Def Leppard and Iron Maiden, the new wave of British heavy metal would have crashed and burned in England.
See, I think without Iron Maiden, you're correct, but because I think Def Leppard was able to reach a different plane, I think they would have kind of gone on and just, I think, I just think I think of Def Leppard and I think of like big labels and all this stuff. So I think whereas a lot of the British new wave bands there was more DIY, more grungy, and I feel like it would have gotten through and survived. Now Iron Maiden, but at the same time, Iron Maiden is bigger now than they were way back then. So yeah. That's another way this conversation changes. So
well, yeah, and I wonder, would Iron Maiden be as big as they are if it weren't for how big Def Leppard was getting?
Well, Def Leppard would have definitely brought attention to Britain. And that's how a lot of these bands got exposure, make no bones about it. But I think I guess what I'm going to try and make the Judas Priest argument like they may not be a glam band per se, Def Leppard, but they were kind of there at just before the movement and kicked it off. So are you a part of what you started, sort of thing?
Yeah.
And I don't know, for some reason, I got to burr up my ass about lumping them in with the fucking.
I mean, and don't get me wrong, I hate Def Leppard. I mean, I actually have always said that they can't take a hint from God, but like I've never been a fan of their music. And that leads me to who I believe to be the most underrated band in the new wave of British heavy metal, and that would be Diamond Head.
Yep, please, thank you very much. Yeah, I was gonna be like, please tell me it starts with a D and an H.
Diamond Head. Man, first of all, like their first big single, Am I Evil? The vocals on that are like fucking just otherworldly at times. Like it just feels unnatural almost. And like the songwriting and then when you dive deeper into their catalog, they have just fucking amazing music.
Yeah, absolutely. They were and then they like speaking of bands that go on and kind of kickstart another genre. How we were talking, just an argument we are using for Judas Priest with NWOBHM that I just tried to use with Def Leppard and glam. You could use that with Diamond Head and thrash metal, because like not just because Metallica covered them either. It's because just the riffs, they're crunchy, the tone, it's there.
I mean, and the reason Metallica covered them is because they really were a predecessor to thrash. You know, like they're, if you look at like who Metallica says are their influences, if I remember correctly, it is Motorhead, Diamond Head, King Diamond, you know,
Budgie.
Yeah.
Yep, Budgie would have been another one.
But like, yeah, I mean, Diamond Head, it definitely was a huge influence on the San Fran thrash scene.
Yeah. Are you aware of Banger Productions? They're the guys that put out that documentary Metal, a Headbanger's Journey.
No.
Okay, well, this is excellent stuff. You should check it out. You can probably find it on YouTube. There's a Canadian guy named Sam Dunn, and he went to college for I don't want to disrespect it, but basically he's doing studies and did a documentary on metal, and got to go around and meeting all these bands, and I got the soundtrack for it, and it's got Am I Evil by Diamond Head on there, and now this is probably 15 to 18 years old, this documentary, and I'm sitting there listening to it, and the Diamond Head version of the original version of Am I Evil comes on, and my buddy Jay, who is a metalhead, he's into like shit like Sabotage and other bands that like they're kind of off the cuff. You're not necessarily going to think of those, right? And he's like, "Who's this covering Metallica?" And I was like, "Dude, what the fuck? Like, I thought you knew your shit." Like,
yeah, and like, yeah, and it's such a good song, and then like diving deeper into their catalog and shit like what is it?
Oh, I'm fucking terrible with
Making Music and like the Coffin Train, because they actually switched and Truckin', Shout at the Devil, Wizard Sleeve, like just fucking a whole catalog of these just fucking amazing hits. There's one that I was looking for that I can't think of the name of, but yeah, they're sorry, and then I switched screens for a second. But yeah, I mean, yeah, and they, even when they switch singers, they've gone through a few different singers, and they always find guys that are just fucking good. Like their one singer sounds a lot like Chris Cornell, but he carries the album that he's on fucking beautifully.
And that's like, fuck, man, to draw that kind of comparison too, that's impressive. And a lot of people might be thinking like, ooh, like grunge band, but that's another funny thing, because I look at Soundgarden as a metal band, not a grunge band. Like,
oh yeah, I never really got into Soundgarden, and then yesterday I was like, I should listen to Soundgarden, and I put on Bad Motorfinger, and I'm like, I should have listened to this a lot earlier.
Dude, that's how I was. I got into them oddly, fuck, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago, something like that. It was like probably right after Alice in Chains, because Alice in Chains was the same kind of thing. Like the Nirvana and Pearl Jam were the only two bands from the grunge era that really did anything for me, and even those I got into in like '97-ish.
Yeah,
I know Pearl Jam. I was there for the beginning album for 10.
Yeah,
But anyways,
I was there for Nevermind. I was there for 10. I got Nevermind the week it came out. So or not the week, wait, shortly after it came out. I got it for my birthday. And I know it just came out in like November. But like but yeah, I got Nevermind for my birthday. And my 14th birthday. And like and was into Pearl Jam. Soundgarden didn't do it for me back then because I really didn't like Chris Cornell's voice at first. And then like as years went on, I was like, oh yeah, I do like this, but I still never like listened to it. You know what I did listen to was I got really into his other band. The one with Tom Morello.
Oh, Audio Slave.
Audio Slave. I got into Audio Slave last summer, and it like they've got some great fucking tunes.
Yeah. There's what is it? That's that Like a Stone. Just the way his voice carries on that one is just because I was into Audio Slave before I was a Soundgarden fan. Because like I liked Black Hole Sun, and that was about it. And then, like I said a while ago, I went back and got into Alice in Chains and all these other, and then I was like, okay, let's give Soundgarden a shot now. If Alice in Chains is amazing, maybe Soundgarden is too. And yeah.
So yeah, definitely. But like I said, like the one singer on the One Diamond Head album always reminds me of Chris Cornell. And just does a great job throughout the whole album.
See, now I got to go and back and look for that because it's funny. It was like I started listening to like all the new wave bands or new wave. I'm just gonna go with NWOBHM. I don't like the NWOBHM phrase, but I'm starting to get why it's used because be trying to repeat it a million times over the course of a podcast like this, you can burn a tongue out in a hurry. Where was I before I went off on that one?
Well, we were just I was telling you that the album, what is it? I believe it is the I don't know, this one. Let me see if I can do this without making a lot of noise.
That's what I was getting at. Is you start listening to all the NWOBHM bands trying to refresh it up and let's do this. And then, but you don't listen to every album from each band, and it's they're one of those bands where, through the grace of things like Spotify and YouTube Music, I've like go and checked out an album or a couple songs off an album here or two there.
Yeah,
like, okay, yeah, that's all right.
And the Diamond Head is a band that when I was listening, last year around this time, every single day, I was putting on a video game, putting on an album, and just finding a band, putting on an album and playing music and just playing, and just building that morning metal playlist. Even before Cannabuzz, I was on Cannabuzz, and even before I was doing morning metal, I was building that playlist. And Diamond Head was one of the bands that I listened to early on, that I listened through. A lot of bands, it's like I listen to like the first part of their catalog, and then when it starts to wear on me or gets redundant, I'm like, I'll set them down for a while. Diamond Head, I listened straight through. Like I said, I really feel they're the most underrated of all of these bands. Like I listened all through Priest, Motorhead, and Maiden and Dio. I didn't listen through all of Saxon yet, or Accept for that matter. I've listened through like their first several albums, and then I've listened to them like on random, But I still need to dive into some of their later albums.
I don't think I've ever I know I've made it through all of Accept's catalog, unless they've released something in the last couple of years that I haven't heard, because they're one of the bands that they're one of those bands that I didn't like or dislike for the longest time. And then about 5 years ago, I was working in a community called Hazelton. I remember doing this utility hydro contract out there, slashing and cutting away. And I had my satellite radio on, and the song "Balls to the Wall" and was always on because I was Ozzy's Boneyard, right?
Yeah.
That all the time, and then a few other Accept songs. And I was like, okay, so I went from being like, this song's not bad, I like it, and it actually balls to the wall. My last year, fighting forest fires on the fire line, "Balls to the Wall" was my cruise theme song. So,
Oh, nice.
which was once again through the grace of the satellite radio and getting all that going on.
Yeah.
And then once a couple years ago, when I as a family, we got the YouTube Music subscription. So it's just like Spotify, but it's YouTube's version of it. Except it was one of the bands that I got into because it was just right at that time where I had this access to download whatever the fuck I wanted while I was listening to it. It was like,
right.
Good. And that's where I come with my opinion that they're like the AC/DC of that music movement.
Yeah.
It's just straightforward. You know what you're gonna get. It's heavy. It's really good rhythm, and like you can kind of draw similarities between Udo and Brian Johnson's voices too. They have that kind of to them at times, so.
And they do have a new album, just came out in 2021.
Oh shit, really?
And another one from 2017.
Okay, I've heard that one. Yeah.
Yeah, they actually had 3 albums in 2017, 2 live albums and then a studio album.
God damn, I got to
The Rise of Chaos was the studio album. Then Symphonic Terror and Restless and Live. I think Symphonic Terror might be a specialty album, but I don't know.
Okay, fuck yeah.
But yeah, I definitely need to listen to more of them.
Yeah, I
think I made it to. I don't think I made it out of the 80s with them.
Oh yeah, you're into some good stuff then. When you get into the 90s, like they seem to remember there's kind of a fade. Like they didn't go into the ballady soft stuff like a lot of bands did, but they.
Yeah.
It's.
Yeah, I know. I listened to Metal Heart is a really good one. And Metal Heart, the song also is probably my favorite Accept song because it's it goes into that break into Fur Elise and it's just a really fun journey.
See, it's another one of those. I hate to take the obvious song, but for me, it is Balls to the Wall because it was, like I said, that was the song where I was at the time. There was other Accept songs that I liked better. But then after repetition and hearing it over time, and then when you get into fighting forest fires and shit like that, the Balls to the Wall kind of brings meaning to what you're doing as well. Yeah. So it's
yeah,
fucking great stuff. What do you think about like a band like say the Tigers of Pantang?
I haven't listened to them. I think I've come up. I think I've seen them come by in like, have I? Is it spelled with a Y? Tyger?
Yeah. See, to me, they're a band that I was hoping you knew more about. I tried listening to them, and I don't know, like I don't know. It's sorry.
No. I'm.
There's somebody that'll watch this. That'll be like, yes, they're talking about my favorite band, and then they'll be like, neither of them know a fucking thing about them.
Never heard of them. I've seen the name, so like I feel like they may have like popped up on wow. They're emerging in '78 as part of the new wave of British heavy metal. English rockers Tigers of Pantang employ a muscular blend of melody and might that falls somewhere between Def Leppard and Saxon.
More the Def Leppard side, I would say. It's I okay, here's fuck. Well, I shouldn't knock this because I don't actually have anything against them. Whereas I have something against a lot of the glam bands. Whereas I think like most of the glam bands saw what Motley Crue was doing and what maybe Def Leppard had started, and they just took it into like super hyper overdrive. And just like any sequel to any movie, it's not as good as the first kind of thing, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
just, I feel like yeah, they're one of those bands that gets into there, it's lumped in with that.
Yeah, but I will give them a listen at some point, because just to see where they line up with the rest of the new wave of British heavy metal. Because like all of these other bands except for Def Leppard, I love. You know, like I could go and drive, put on a random playlist of any one of these bands and just be in my zone the entire time.
Yep. Yep, I hear that. I'm just trying to, I had a list of bands because I knew we were going to get to the part here where it's like, okay, you've talked about all the other ones. Let's like all the obvious ones. Let's get to some of the
Trying to think of any
I
others.
don't know where I put my list.
Because those bands, the ones that we have talked about, were all the ones that really stand out to me. I'm trying to think, who's the other one?
Were you what are you a big fan of Samson, Bruce Dickinson's band before he went into Iron Maiden? Have you listened to them much?
Not enough to form an opinion.
Okay.
Like I feel like I don't know if I've ever actually heard anything of theirs. I've listened to Enter the Dragon. Is that what it's called? The Bruce Dickinson solo album from like
Early to
right
mid
before.
90s.
Yeah, it was like right before he left Maiden. He recorded a solo album, and then he left to pursue his solo career. Had that go, buddy. Um, and that, but like Yannick Gears played on his solo album, Tears of the Dragon. But like for the most part, it's like, all right, like it's a decent album. It's got some good songs, but like, you know, it just kind of didn't stand out at all.
I feel that Bruce Dickinson and Iron Maiden are kind of synonymous. It just doesn't work. The Blaze Bailey albums and Paul Di'Anno albums were okay, but without Bruce Dickinson, it's just not right. And you could say the same about Judas Priest. Like what their stuff with Tim Ripper Owens wasn't bad. It's not quite the same contrast, but it's not the same. Now, on the other hand, Rob Halford, his album, like his stuff he did with Fight and Two, that shit was great. It wasn't Judas Priest or Halford, the Halford albums too. But it wasn't Judas Priest, but that stuff was still good and could stand on its own. Whereas Bruce Dickinson's solo stuff, it's not like that.
And here's my thing with Blaze, right? Like, first of all, Blaze came into a tough spot because he had big shoes to fill. But now you're Iron Maiden and you're hiring someone to replace Bruce Dickinson. You've got to hire someone. You got to hire a tenor.
Yeah.
Right? You can't hire a baritone.
Yeah.
Now, if you listen to the Blaze albums and you look at the credits, the albums where Blaze is credited are the best songs. It's not because he's the best songwriter in the group. It's because he had a say in the songs that were being written. So he was writing them so he could sing them.
Good point. I might have to go back and look at this stuff and pay attention because to me, my huge fascination with Iron Maiden came in about when I was 18 or 19. By then, I was already mostly past that whole sitting in your parents' house in your bedroom, reading the album credits and who played what instrument on what album and who co-wrote which songs and stuff like that. So I was already mostly past that by the time Iron Maiden kind of come through. But that'd be that's interesting. I'll have to go and have a look.
So here's what's funny is that like that was me throughout high school and most of college, like you said, devouring everything in the liner notes and everything. And then when I got into Maiden, I started doing that again because I started looking at like who's in this band, what's the history of this band, like because I just got that into it to like, you know. And then when I was I do Maiden Mondays, and for a while, Maiden Monday I was listening to an entire Iron Maiden album, and it came to those Blaze albums, and I had the liner notes up, the Wikipedia, but it had all the credits on it. I had that up as I was listening to the songs, and I would occasionally add some of the songs, and that's when I paired it up, when it was like, wow, when he was part of the writing process of a song, where he has writing credits, the songs are better. And he sings them better. Now, the other big thing I actually looked to find a live concert with Blaze. Tried to find them because the best Maiden is live Maiden, right?
Yeah.
Like, so the only concert I could find with Blaze Bayley singing, the entire concert, I think it was under an hour long, and they did Wasted Years, and everything else was Blaze Bayley. So like,
only doing the stuff that he can actually do.
Yeah, they were only playing the stuff that he could sing, and they kicked him out. Like when they negotiated Bruce's return, Blaze was out either way. It had nothing to do with Bruce coming back. It was he couldn't hack it on the road. They had to cancel because like one of the things that made Iron Maiden iconic and what makes them iconic to this day is that they are relentless on the road, and they tour and they go to fucking everywhere. And so when you have to cancel halfway through your North American tours on 2 album tours, you got to go, buddy. Like you can't hack our schedule. Well, we need someone who can, do it with throat cancer, for Christ's sake.
Well, the other thing is the reason they brought Bruce Dickinson in the first place was because Paul Di'Anno couldn't hit the high notes that a lot of the other bands that are in the metal genre need to be able to do. You need to be able to hit that. Bruce Dickinson do that. And then you kick him out, but he leaves. However it is, it doesn't matter. Well, you bring Blaze Bayley in, he can't do that. And it's you're kind of back where you started to begin with, using this guy who can't do what you wanted him to in the beginning with. So you're right. You miss a couple of tours or have to have them canceled because of whatever your issues are. But at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if they're already kind of looking at, their album sales probably went down, but that was the state of music in those eras too, especially for heavy metal, right? Heavy metal was tanking. But so you have that, and they were, because in my opinion, and you could probably correct me very well off this if I'm wrong, it was when Bruce Dickinson came back to the band was when they really truly started to blow up and become more of what we're seeing today.
So you had like the Power Slave album, right? Back long before that, which at that point they're selling out the big clubs, right? Going on a tour, selling out some pretty big clubs. And so by the time Bruce Dickinson left, right? So you had Seventh Son, which was Adrian's last album. And then Adrian was like, they go into the studio to start doing No Prayer for the Dying. Steve wants to go in the direction of these more like shorter metal song hits. And Adrian is like, I liked the flow that we were getting into with these like kind of epic things, what's really funny about that is that Adrian writes all their short poppy songs. he writes all their singles, not the long ones, which is also another theory I have about all of this. But so Adrian leaves, and then Bruce is like, well, I recorded this other album with this guy Yannick, let's bring him in. Yannick comes in, they do No Prayer for the Dying and Fear of the Dark. No Prayer for the Dying was rocky. They didn't have the same writing capacity because Adrian's a great fucking songwriter. And it was just a rockier album. Then you had Fear of the Dark, which was a good album with great songs. You know what I mean? Yeah. Fear of the Dark, great song. Like, but it was also their album where they decided to take we're going to throw a ballad on the song. We have to do a ballad too. And they did fucking Wasting Love, which is my least favorite Iron Maiden song. But I've also said that being my least favorite Iron Maiden song is like being my least favorite kind of cake or my least favorite kind of pie. You know, yeah, I'm going to eat it and I'm going to enjoy it, but it's not my favorite.
Yeah, it's just not going to be the first one down the hatch given the choice.
But yeah, so Maiden, you know, they did. So by the time they did Fear of the Dark, basically Bruce was like showing up late to shit, just not taking shit seriously, was kind of, you know, becoming problematic on stage sometimes, was running his mouth. And they really had like my understanding was that it was you don't have to fire me because I quit kind of thing.
Yeah.
So at that point, they were like one of the biggest bands in metal for as big as metal was, without being Metallica, Guns N' Roses, or glam, you know, without being radio friendly. You know, of all of the big bands that didn't really get the radio play, Iron Maiden was pretty big. They got an MTV special, right? And they did the MTV special. I forget what it was called, but it was their big goodbye concert with the magician. I forget who the magician was too, but like they would do these dark, bloody magic tricks, and then they'd do Iron Maiden songs. They'd do a magic trick, and in the very end, they locked Bruce in a casket, and Eddie came out and decapitated Bruce and put his head on a spike. And that was the end of the show, and that was the end of Bruce Dickinson with Iron Maiden and the band. And that's when they brought in Blaze Bayley. And so like they were poised to really like kind of blow up. And then he couldn't hack these tours.
Yeah.
And nobody was buying the albums because they weren't as good. Because like the new singer couldn't hack it. So
well, and it's different. It's look at like Motley Crue, and they got rid of fucking Vince Neil and brought in John Corabi, right? And John Corabi is not a bad singer, nor is Blaze Bayley. It's just, but in that formula, it just doesn't work. And when people are so used to having fucking Vince Neil screaming girls, 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 and you bring someone else in that just the look is different, the sound is different.
Yeah.
Really
and like, yeah, and that's why. So in 2000, when they negotiated Bruce's return, and then they brought back Adrian Smith as well. So they brought in, like, first of all, their most successful songwriters. Like, I mean, aside from Steve Harris is like, but like their singles. Name an Iron Maiden single. The first name. What are some of the first ones that come to the top of your head if you think Iron Maiden singles?
2 Minutes to Midnight, Aces High would be the
okay. Aces High, I think is Adrian.
A Run to the Hills would be another one. Number of the Beast.
Number of the Beast is Steve Harris. But like Wasted Years, The Trooper, Flight of Icarus, those are all Adrian Smith songs, and even their newest, the single off the new album, the Writing on the Walls, and it's funny. I was listening to that song the first time or not the first time, but like when it first came out and I had it on repeat, and I was just texting a friend about it, and I'm like, is that Smith Dickinson? Because like the sort of country twang American influence with the Dickinson lyrics, I'm like, is that Smith Dickinson? Fuck yeah, it is. Like, because Adrian Smith writes many of their best singles. He's just the longest song he wrote is Passchendaele, which is also just a fucking brilliant song. But one of the like I think Dance with Death is probably the weakest album post 2000, but that's probably the best song from that, you know.
Yeah. All right. So we're gonna start doing something here called the mid-show shoutouts. We're actually getting towards the end of the show, but I figured, hey, we're having a good conversation. We kind of lost track of who's hanging out with us. So I just want to look here over in the live chat.
First, I want to say, Stoney, we'll talk about the Melvins, and I see Stoney's been talking about the Melvins, and so we'll talk about the Melvins on another day, because they're a band that I've listened to a very little bit, and every time I do, I'm like, why have I not listened to these guys a lot more? So I'm gonna dive into them this week, maybe, so we can talk about them another day.
Yep, the Melvins are another great band from the Seattle area, 2-drummer band. That could be a good discussion to be had there.
They're from Seattle, you said?
Yeah, from the Seattle area, at least.
Maybe we should discuss Seattle next week.
Oh, well, we'll see. Well, we'll see where that goes. We got Stoney's going to join us actually next week when we.
Oh, that's right.
So, but maybe Stoney's got a bit of knowledge on the Seattle and the grunge scene as well. Maybe we can go that way. We'll get some story time out of him and see. Well, we'll just see how that one goes. How's that sound?
Yeah, we'll see where we go with Stoney. Yeah, we're gonna kind of let you sort of guide some of the ship next week, Stoney. Kind of hear what you have to say.
That sounds like a good one. Maybe that one, maybe we'll consider firing up a little bit early on that one too. But before I get off of that one, let's say hi to Let's Be Buds. Thanks for hanging out with us, Rick, and South Nelson Farms. We love you, brother. One of the reasons for doing the show Rick a little bit longer for this one was because like our last one we did where it was like take 5 albums that really mean something to you. To do that in an hour was actually ended up being a hurried up show, and it seemed like an hour and a half would have been a little bit more appropriate. So I just Steve and I were doing a pre-show. We thought, fuck, you know what? Let's start it so that if we get a little bit of dead space, it's not the worst thing that happens. But at the very least, because we're going into talking about some bands that we're very passionate about. Some of them we like, some of them we dislike, and that's where the passion gets directed, you know, sometimes. It's just, it sucks to have to hurry up the conversation. I guess that's what I was trying to get, because there's like, that last show I remember being like, oh, we got like 15 minutes, and I figured in my head trying to do the math thing, we got about 25 minutes worth of talking to do, and it's just sucks because those were the best albums too, right? It's like we sit there, we have this great time talking about the albums, which even the low tier albums were albums that we love, but it was just, you know, it's, you get to your number one album, which for me was Antichrist Superstar, and I was doing that looking at just as we wanted to be wrapping up because we got in the places we wanted to be. So it's like, okay, let's just give this a quick dusting over.
I think it's a good idea to give it that little bit of cushion there, because this also gives me a little bit of time to get shit set up for what I've got going on next. Robin Thomas also, hello.
Oh, they're in there now too. Awesome.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Welcome.
Great to see you. Get see them hanging out with us on the Caribou Heart TV, our 3 weekly shows on a regular basis. We're seeing them all the time. Thank you very much for your support. Here's actually a funny upgrade that I got to make. Last week I kind of gave a little bit of a review on the new Black Label Society album, and I gave it a 3 out of 5. And basically my reasons for being, it didn't have anything that really, no songs that really jumped out at me although the whole thing as a whole was pretty good. I think I'm gonna bump that up to a 4. Now there's still no songs on it really just jumped out at me. It was like, yeah, that's my fucking jam. There is some really good shit on there where it's like the opening song sounds like fucking Megadeth to me, and the song I'm thinking of I think is "Angry Again." Is the Megadeth song I'm thinking of that it sounds like. I'm thinking that's I'm not gonna go out not be listing songs here that like because I'll fuck the titles up, but it sounds like Megadeth and it's a great jam. And then the second song on there, I think it was sounds sort of like "Hole in the Sky" by Sabbath to me. And but anyways, the reason I give it the upgrade is the solos. Anytime you go to Zakk Wylde, you know you're gonna have some amazing solos, but uh, like I forgot I didn't get to tell you about how my night ended or what happened to me a Friday night there, Steve, and I can maybe tell you off the air. It doesn't belong here, but let's just say this Saturday I was in a really fucked up mindset, just having a tough time, and the girlfriend and I we drove to the next town over about an hour away. And after listening to a bunch of that album here and there, well, I could throughout the week, we threw it on because it was just enough to be able to listen to it all. And I'm sitting there and just, when a guitar solo or that sound just literally lifts your spirits up and just it brings you
when you
up,
can
man.
feel the physical change in your body, when you feel like that click in your brain, it actually does something to like physically put it through your entire body. You can like fucking feel the music.
Yeah. It's it's to me it's like in the heaviest. It's not the heaviest Black Label Society album. I would say it's about right down there about the middle. But for me, it's like all the solos are just so melodic, and they remind me kind of on the Scullage DVD. They do there's a video of them doing Spoke in the Wheel where they do the song. It's an acoustic song. And then Zakk just goes off and does these solos for a couple minutes, and these just like high kind of just. It reminds me of that, but like just man, it was just so uplifting. So yeah, I got to give that one an upgrade to a number 4. It remains to see if there'll ever be a number 5, in my opinion, again. But if you haven't checked out the new Black Label Society Doom Crew Inc., you give it a go. Like it's in a day and age where music is so hard to come by new good music. Check it out.
Yeah. It turns out my laptop is going to die before much longer. So this might be a good time to start wrapping it up.
All right. Okay, we'll get on with that then. So coming up very next year, the Michigan Bros Grow Show. They've got Ed Rosenthal, author of a couple of cannabis grow books. Big deal for them. He's just releasing. I don't know if he's released his new book yet or if it's coming out soon, but he's doing his book tour. And the brothers over at the Michigan Bros Grow Show, they managed to get him on for a bullshit session. It's going to be one hell of a show. The last couple of shows we've done, we've managed to run over into that time where they'd be running, and we wanted to make sure we didn't do that this time. So we're going to get the fuck out of here early. Gives you a chance to go and take a piss or raid the fridge, roll a couple joints, get a fresh batch of dabs out, whatever it is you got to do. But do not miss it. Head on over to the Michigan Bros Grow Show YouTube channel and catch Ed Rosenthal live. It's going to be fucking stellar.
All right. You all have a good night. And Caribou, as always, is a fucking great time hanging out and talking metal. Stoney, I look forward to seeing you next week. And yeah.
It's going to be a hell of a time. All right, brother. I love you. Great bullshitting with you. We'll see you next week. And
love you, brother.
Yeah, man. Have a great weekend until I see you then. Too. And if I get a chance, I'll come hang out with you in some morning metal. I love hanging out with you while you get to do that.
Absolutely. I'll be there tomorrow morning for morning metal for Maiden Monday.
Horns up. See you then. Peace out, everyone. We love you. Remember, head on over to the Michigan Bros Grow Show YouTube channel for